We now deep dive into one of the subjects, one of the 10 trends that we have identified before. So let me please welcome on stage our new speaker, is the Chief Creative Officer at Modern Meadow, please. And she's going to introduce us to the subject of biofabrication. She's an expert. She's one of the leaders in the field. So let me give a warm welcome to Suzanne Lee.
Thanks, Stefania. Thank you so much. Let's just check this is working. Thank you so much to Alta Gamma for inviting me to participate today. It's a great honor to be part of the first Next Design Perspectives event. Biofabrication is a word that I'm sure is maybe unfamiliar to many people here today. I think it's a word you're going to hear a lot more, and for me, it's something that I believe is actually going to become central to the luxury industry in the decades ahead. Why am I a proponent for biofabrication? Well, I actually have started life as a fashion designer. So I'm a graduate of Central St. Martin's in London. I worked as a designer and as a consultant for some very well-known London designers. And I loved the fashion industry. I loved the creativity that surrounded every day. However, I came to not love the impact of our industry on the environment. And in 2018, I think it's pretty hard to escape images like this of landfill. So textiles, I think as many people are aware, is the second largest impact on the planet after oil. Every year in America alone, 10 million tons of textiles go straight to landfill. About 15 years ago, I decided that rather than continue to design more stuff that contributes to this catastrophe, I wanted to actually put design thinking, design skills into finding solutions to these problems. And I think we're seeing customers ask questions around the materials, the way that materials are made into products in brands all around the world, not just in luxury. And an example of this is encouraging brands to form partnerships with organizations who are looking to solve those challenges for their supply chains. So Adidas, quite famously, have been working with an organization called Parley for the Oceans. And Adidas are thinking not just about textiles and landfill, but specifically the problems of plastics choking our oceans.
We made an incredible, moldable, indestructible material, but when we dump it, it doesn't go away. Now, one truck of it ends up in our oceans every minute. It's killing sea life. The fish eat the trash, then we eat the fish. We're feeding ourselves our own garbage, and it's now in our bloodstreams. We've got to avoid plastic, we've got to get it out of the ocean, and reuse it. Look, what if we took some trash and made a sports shoe out of it? And then we made 1 million more from 11 million plastic bottles. What if that was just the start? And what if everyone did that?
Adidas have pledged to rid their supply chain of virgin plastic by 2024. That's a very bold move for a brand that consumes materials at the rate that they do. And they're not alone. Everlane, which is a very well-known online fashion retailer known for its transparency around production, has also committed to not putting new plastic in its supply chain. By 2021, it pledges to be completely new plastic free. So we talked about sport and fashion, mass market product, but luxury too is also listening to the voices of customers who are really questioning the choices, the ethical choices around sourcing materials. So Gucci here going fur-free, but so are all of these brands. And it's not just mainstream luxury. Tesla have also pledged that all their car interiors will be vegan. So you can't put a leather interior into a Tesla car. So rethinking what luxury means in terms of materials is certainly something that is challenging people's thinking. This image, though it might look like some sort of pharmaceutical company, is actually the manufacturing floor of a company in California called Diamond Foundry. So this is a space that is producing lab-grown diamonds. And these diamonds have been described as almost identical in composition and quality to a mined diamond, except that they come without the human and environmental toll that traditional mining has. In 2017, 57% of American millennials said they would consider buying a lab-grown diamond for an engagement ring. Less than a year later, that number rose to 70%. So a 13% increase in under a year of young people for whom new technology, growing a material, is no longer something that they would be scared to purchase. In fact, that's redefining how we think about luxury, and I think it also starts to lay the groundwork for the next generation of materials. So what is next? Well, I think we need to rethink the materials that we really cherish and really question what luxury is in the 21st century. When Marco Bizzarri spoke about Gucci no longer using fur, he actually said, it just isn't modern. So what is modern? Biofabrication, as I mentioned, is a word that may be unfamiliar, but really it's the beginning of a new age of materials. It's nothing short of a material revolution. In the past, we took materials from nature. Silk, leather, fur, diamonds. We cherished the materials of the natural world. And we also created man-made materials from oil, so plastics, nylon, synthetics. We don't need to do that anymore. Biotechnology, the age of designing, engineering, and producing using DNA, enables us to grow the building blocks of nature without going to traditional agriculture. So this really is biofabrication. It's harnessing a living organism to grow materials for us. In the fourth industrial revolution, we're moving away from heavy manufacturing, the extractive processes, heavy chemistry, and we're now thinking about manufacturing with life itself. So meet the new living factories. Bacteria, yeast, algae, animal cells, fungi. These are the new workhorses that designers actually have the ability to employ to grow materials for fashion, for sport, for interiors, for architecture. And the processes that we're using are actually not so unfamiliar. For thousands of years, we've been using fermentation to brew beer or to create wine. And these same processes, here we're seeing mushroom materials growing using waste crops, growing into a three-dimensional form. So in essence, what we have is a living organism that we feed nutrient to, and then we give it hours, and in some cases days, but at the end of that, we can grow materials that can go into the products that we're already creating. So I'm going to take you through a few prototypes of products that are currently exploring biofabricated materials. This Adidas shoe probably looks pretty much like any other shoe in their range, but it has one big difference. The upper for the shoe is made from spider silk. The spider silk didn't come from a spider. Really, the DNA that enables the spider to produce the protein silk was implanted into a bacterium. And then millions of bacteria were fermented to produce spider silk that then was isolated, purified, and turned into a yarn. So this is a German company working with Adidas. I believe Lisa and Andrea talked about mushroom leather. So this is actually the prototype of Stella McCartney's iconic Falabella bag, but actually featuring a mushroom leather material. This is on display at the Victoria and Albert Museum as part of their Fashioned from Nature exhibit, which I think carries on until early next year. This is a Japanese ski brand called Goldwyn working with a Japanese company manufacturing spider silk using bacteria. This is on display at London's Design Museum. And this silk hasn't been grown by bacteria, but the color and the printing on it is the result of a living bacteria producing pigment. It's the work of Natsai Chiesa, who's joining us on the panel next, and I'm sure we'll speak more about that. And this is more knitted spider silk. This is Stella McCartney prototyping with a company called Bolt Threads in California. And this is really where my journey in this field began. So this is a jacket that I grew over 10 years ago using bacteria to produce cellulose. And this is actually the process that was used. So this is a vat of sugary green tea and a symbiotic organism of yeast and bacteria where the bacteria are feeding on the nutrient in the tea solution, and they're producing nanofibers of cellulose. And these are rising through the liquid, and at the surface of the liquid, they're forming a material. That material can then be harvested and dried to produce these prototype garments. So these garments have been grown by a living organism. This is pure cellulose. The garments themselves are not bacteria. They're made of bacteria. So the bacteria formed the material. But this project actually began back in 2003, and it was called Bioculture. So it was really the early days of biology and fashion coming together to explore a future in which we can grow materials. And then really thinking about what does that actually mean for design? Because as a designer, you can get involved earlier in the process. So these three garments were exploring the very nature of the material itself. The garment on the left here, the biker jacket, the black color was not about dyeing or adding color to the garment. Because the garment was acidic, we were able to take wet material and make contact with metal and then oxidize it so it would change color without using any additional dyes. The garment in the middle, the denim jacket, this is clearly indigo dyed, but what we discovered was that the purity of the cellulose and its love of water enabled us to dye it with just the minimal exposure to chemicals and to water. So, if you think about a traditional cotton fabric, to create really dark indigo denim, you might need to dip it maybe up to 18 times. And this garment took one dip, a very short amount of time, so significantly less water and chemicals. And then the final one on the right, This was a garment that really explored the material's desire to adopt color and to permanently anchor a stain. So this was exploiting the idea of, if you drop wine down a white shirt and then you don't immediately wash it, it would stain. So this is really sort of exploiting that and getting it to stay permanent. So these are waste fruit and vegetable dyes created in an engineered stenciled print. So this was all very exciting at the time. It, for me, gave a vision for the future of what fashion could be as we started to think about living materials, design and biology coming together. The problem with this project is that cellulose is a commodity fiber. As we looked into the economics of scaling a process like this, clearly, it was not going to compete with a subsidized cotton global market. So ultimately, Bioculture, in its first instance, really failed. What we discovered was that for new materials to enter the market, they need to come in at a certain level of value density, and cotton is the cheapest thing there is. So for that reason, Bioculture really came to an end. However, it led me on a subsequent journey that is really where I've spent the last few years of my life. So I was invited in 2014 to leave London, to come to New York, and to join modern Meadow, and to really head up design for a biotech company, where I now have a team of designers working alongside scientists and engineers, really to grow the future of leather materials, but without animals. So we use yeast, a yeast cell that we design and engineer to produce collagen. So collagen is the protein that we have in our skin, but also in animal skin. And we take that collagen, we purify it, we can create materials in many different forms using collagen. We can tan it, but it enables us to do things that leather really is not able to do when it comes from an animal. So this T-shirt was the very first prototype we ever created with our collagen. It's actually a commission from Paola Antonelli for her Items is Fashion Modern exhibit at MoMA last year.
At Modern Meadow, we're looking to take the building blocks of nature to create a whole new range of biologically advanced materials that are really enhanced by human creativity and ingenuity and can do new things in terms of design, in terms of performance, and in terms of functionality.
Biofabricated materials are unique because we're building them from the bottom up, from the cellular level, forming that into a three-dimensional object.
The building blocks of these materials are grown. We've developed yeast that allows us to produce collagen, and collagen becomes the building block in our materials.
You're starting to think about creating materials that you couldn't create any other way. An animal takes 2 years to grow up before that protein is available for use, or a tree takes a year to decades. Our process to produce that basic building block of collagen and purify it is a week.
So how do we think about this new field of materials when it comes to luxury? Well, the first thing we need to think about is time and the time it takes to bring products to market. So if we look at traditional fashion, a collection could take around 3 months. Fast fashion is bringing that number down ever quicker. Biotech, on the other hand, can take 8 to 10 years to bring one product to market. And if you think about the last big revolutionary fiber for the fashion industry, I would argue that perhaps it was something like Lycra. This was actually invented in 1962. It took DuPont 10 years to develop it, and then a further 3 years to bring it to market. But if you think about the time it took for a new material like Lycra to really have impact across all markets in many product categories, it's taken decades. So if you think about the 1980s, Lycra found its place in fitness and sportswear, more performance clothing. In the 1990s, we started to see it be included into woven cloths for men's suiting, for example, to add comfort. Today, Lycra is in the majority of the denim that we wear. And in 2010, in America, over 80% of the clothing that people were wearing contained some percentage of Lycra. So that's a huge time frame in which that material came to market, found an initial application in fitness, and now it disappears into so much of what we wear. But it didn't happen overnight. So as we think about new biofabricated materials, we're really just at the beginning of this. It's going to be a long journey, but once we start developing in this direction, I don't think we'll look back. And unsurprisingly, the fashion industry, it hasn't lost this, the media attention and focus around these new materials. So this is Miroslava Duma on this year's cover of Russian Vogue. Mira is well known as being a fashion influencer, but she's actually moved from influencer to investor. She's invested in companies in Silicon Valley who are producing lab-grown leather, fur, and diamonds. And Stella McCartney, as we've seen, has also really been out meeting with biotech companies and is collaborating with companies who can enable her to introduce these materials, to be one of the first to introduce those materials to her brand.
Material innovation is incredibly important to us, and more every day, actually, looking at recycled materials, looking at biodegradable materials, and we're now working with a brand new technology and making our Falabella bags out of a Milo material, which is actually groundbreaking technology, and it can change and shift an entire industry. Working with someone like Bolt Threads means that the fashion industry can actually be in the future and be modern and be game changers.
So what are the benefits of these materials? Well, they're clearly animal-free. They have a lighter environmental footprint. They have new design opportunities. They potentially have new performance properties. They're more transparent, more traceable in terms of supply chain. When Adidas chose to work with a biofabricated material, they saw innovation not just at the product level, not just at the material level, but they were enthralled by the idea of being able to design the very nature of the material itself.
When you think of the majority of the applications that we deal with today, you're still designing using a lot of mechanical processes, right? So you're looking at structures of the knitting or structures of the weaving. When you back up earlier in the process and you can actually control not only the yarn choice, which we can still do today, but how you would create the proteins that go into the yarn. That starts to become a revolution in the way that you can actually design and engineer products to a very precise specification.
So as a designer, I've been extremely engaged with this field, really wanting to introduce more people to the companies, the designers and researchers who are at the forefront of biofabrication. And in order to sort of pursue that more, I founded an event called Biofabricate. And this is an annual gathering in New York every year that really brings together the leading companies in the space, those researchers, brands who are interested in working with these companies, and it features many of the people that you're going to see on our panel following. It takes place at Brooklyn's new lab, which is part of the Brooklyn Navy Yard. This building actually houses many companies at the forefront of advanced manufacturing. And this year is the 5th anniversary of Biofabricate. So the field of biofabrication has been around for about a decade, but it's really only in the last 5 years that we've seen a lot more material development, and we're really going to be looking to the next 5 years as these materials come to market, begin to scale, and we start to receive customer feedback around what they like and what they don't like. So I hope Alta Gamma will forgive me for a shameless plug. We would like to offer a discount to all of the attendees of the Next Design Perspectives to join us in New York on December the 13th to meet more of the companies producing these materials. And I hope that this has been a useful introduction to the panel that is following. So thank you very much.